Hey guys, it's the Synth Doctor here, and tonight we're going to do a little video on rebuilding, in this example, Roland sliders, but this concept applies to Moog sliders, Roland. Alps sliders are a little bit different, but basically any sort of Alps analog slider that you may see in the 80s on vintage gear, like this edit slider that we have here. Also, something you'd see in the Moog MG1, the Moog Rogue, you know, any sort of synth like that. Right here, we actually have the panel board out of the Roland JX3P. Dead giveaway by these nice silver buttons here. So, let's get started. Alright, so the first part of the experiment here, of course, is to gather your materials. So, first things first, you're going to need your desoldering weapon of choice. And we're going out with the big guns here, the good old FR301. You can use whatever you want to use. We covered some of the basics in the last video. Of course, you're going to need your board. Like I said, I got this 3P panel board, and you can see we're already missing a slider here. That's okay. We're going to rebuild this edit slider as well. So, the first tool you're going to really need to use is this brush. If you're cleaning any residual dust, hair, grime, crap off the board. I know it sounds crazy. In the next video or so in the series, I'm actually going to show you washing the circuit boards in the sink. This is for really yucky boards, but we're going to keep it simple tonight by just doing, you know, a simple slider rebuild, swap, and working with what we have. You're going to need a decent set of strong needle nose pliers here to help us bend the little tabs on the bottom of the slider. You're going to need some good quality silicone grease. What I like to use. You can get this at your home improvement store. You'll also need a fine tip or a very thin flathead screwdriver that's also used in conjunction to pry the little tabs apart, which I will show you. A Sharpie if you so choose to mark the orientation of the parts. If you are a novice, it's okay. I'm not a novice. Sometimes I still mark the parts. We all have those days. And last but not least, you're going to need some sort of swab to clean the material. So a lot of folks like to use regular Q-tips. You can get these wooden medical grade Q-tips that are a little stronger and they hold up better. I'll show that. Personally here, of course, the Synth Doctor is a little spoiled and likes to use these clean room grade swabs that are made out of woven polyester. They are not cheap at all. I think it's like nearly $350 to $400 for like a 500 count or a couple hundred count a case, whatever they come in. Yeah, they're not cheap, and they make different sizes. Of course, I'm all used up on the larger ones, but these little ones I save for rubber dome contacts and things I really care about because they don't leave any lint or residue behind. You got to be careful with Q-tips because they like to snag on the burrs of the metal, and you can tear little threads out and it'll get stuck in the slider parts. And you know, as long as you're careful, it'll be okay. You could use compressed air to clean them out as well. But enough with that. Let's take it one step at a time and let's get going. First thing is we're going to remove a slider and then get a little anatomy lesson. Alright, so here's our victim. You can see we have this edit slider. We're going to remove this to rebuild it. Generally why you'd want to rebuild sliders is they're scratchy, they don't work well. In a case of a digitally controlled analog synthesizer, you can see the value of these LEDs move when you edit, so you can tell if it's jumpy. It doesn't work quite well. This one actually works okay, but you can just tell it's awful. It's kind of sticky, not very smooth, not linear in motion, kind of binds up. We don't like that. So what we're going to do is just take your brush here and you're going to work all of this dust and crap just off the circuit board. I'd like to get it away from the slider. My favorite friend is air compressor. I won't take you to the garage. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory that you can blow all the dust and the grime out. That's my personal weapon of choice. But I'm trying to demonstrate what the common man may have at home, and I think everybody's got some sort of paintbrush. Soft bristles are good. Just, you know, light strokes around, clear the area. You know, I'm going to clean this whole board, but for now, let's just clean the area we're working in You can already see on camera actually makes quite a bit of difference. And then of course we can flip this guy over and just make sure we're working with the iron is clean, because no one likes the smell of burning hair. So I will get you guys into position here. We're gonna flow some fresh solder and we'll go ahead and remove this slider. I'll be right back. Okay, so the slider is out, and as you can see, the hacker there makes it very, very easy. So the doctor is now going to give a little synthesizer anatomy lesson. Alright guys, so the first part of the slider we have over here is actually the body. So I figure I'm going to show you little bits and pieces before we go ahead and take it apart, just to make it a little easier. So we have the outside of the slider here, which is the chassis. Basically this clips over and allows the actual shaft over here to slide up and down. So this is an important part. We want this clean here. Then over here you have the actual tracks. So this body of the slider, actually in this case we have 2 carbon tracks here, and this contains the resistive material in which the shaft will move over. That's what makes this a variable potentiometer. So you can think of the knobs and stuff that you spin around. Well, this one moves laterally, as we see. And of course we have the pins underneath. Then we have the shaft, which I've been talking about. The shaft is interesting because it actually has these little fingers here, which we can see way at the bottom. Forgive me guys, trying not to cover you up here. But these little fingers come into focus here, actually right on top of the shaft itself. So this is actually what makes contact with the carbon tracks, and of course when you move this up and down, it's going to vary the level of resistance, and that'll be measured by the pins. So effectively that analog voltage you have going through the slider in this case will be turned into a digital value later on, but in some synths and applications you may have the audio path going through the slider, so you can vary the amplitude of a certain signal. In some synthesizers you can have a control voltage, so that would be a voltage that would say go to the oscillator, so you could change the pitch by varying this. Finally we have this little copper coated spring which goes on top of the shaft, and that helps kind of act as like a dampening spring, allowing the shaft to move up and down on the rails here smoothly. And then of course this little nylon insulating piece we can see. So you'll see when we get into the slider, all the parts are going to be filthy, and the first thing we want to do is thoroughly clean everything. That ensures smooth operation. You can see that the slider has already been thoroughly cleaned, so let's do it together. Alright, so forgive me guys, this close-up stuff is pretty hard to do here, but I'm going to attempt my best to show you how to take this guy apart. So, if we get really close here, maybe I'm better off zooming in, you can see that on the slider we have these little crimps, and basically this is attaching the top of the slider I showed you earlier to the body itself. So around the body here we have these tabs, and we have to bend these back to disassemble the slider. So of course if this is your first time here, what you want to do is take note of the orientation of the slider. So if I grab my JX3P board and I put the synth board back up here, okay, I can see that I have my holes up here, my 3 holes, okay, and I know that's the top, and I have my 2 offset holes at the bottom. So I know the slider goes in this way. And to make it real easy, I know it says Japan here. Come on. Okay, it says Japan. So what we're going to do is get our board out of the way. And we have to be careful because the isopropyl alcohol will actually wash this off. But I'm just going to color the top here red, color the body white, and you can also just draw on the sides of the pins here, and this will let us know that this is the bottom of the slider. Of course it only fits in the board one way, but we want to keep these pieces in order. So I think we can all see that pretty well. There we go. So let's crack her open. So first thing I like to do is get a nice flat surface that I can overhang the slider on. So I'm going to do that here. Okay, and now, tempting to do this on camera without blocking myself, what you want to do is grab your flat blade screwdriver, and basically you want to go underneath each pin, and you want to push in and just carefully bend up at the pin. Okay, so we're just going to get this guy up just a little bit. Same way, I'm going to work my way down the slider, dig underneath, pop it up a little. Don't worry, you don't need to get it all the way. I'm going to do the same thing on the last pin here. So we're just creating a little bit of room to get underneath. And then what you want to do is flip your slider around. So of course you can just move the shaft back. And we're going to go ahead and do the other side here. So again, while holding it firmly, dig under. So you can see right here, just going to slip the flat blade carefully underneath. Perfect. And last one here, guys. Take some surgical precision. So once I get these mostly up, what you want to do is then come in with your needle nose pliers. And again, this is hard to capture, but you want to straighten these out, and I'll show you what they look like. So you want to straighten these tabs out all the way until they are vertical, pointing straight up at the sky. And you don't want them to be bent over because then it's not going to release nicely. So let me finish doing this and I'll be right back. Alright guys, so now I have bent all these tabs up. Let's see, alright, now that wants to cooperate nicely. So like I said, you want these little tabs to be pointing vertical. So you can see we got 1, 2, and 3. We got these over here, that guy and that guy. So now what we're going to do is hold the body and basically grab the white part. You can grab these middle sort of pins, there we go. So just carefully lift this up, and if it doesn't want to go, do not force it. Then you got to straighten your tabs out more. So we'll see that that body comes off. Okay. And now we want to take note of where our fingers are pointing. So we can see that I have the wide set of fingers pointing straight back towards the bottom of the slider. Okay, and there are these two that point in either direction. So I'm going to remember that when I remove this, the way I have it oriented, so here's my red mark. Right there is my red mark. Okay, so, and over here on the body is the white mark, the red mark there. Okay, we're going to pull the shaft out, so we're going to lie everything the way it's supposed to be. Like so. Perfect. So take note of this, take a picture so you remember, and now we are going to clean the carbon track. Okay guys, so what you're going to want to do is take your IPA. I'm going to do my first pass with the Q-tip so I can show everybody how the Q-tip works, and then I'm going to go use my fancy schmancy cleaning room swabs. So you're going to want to dip your medical grade Dr. Q-tip into the IPA, and we're just going to start gently rubbing these tracks up and down. And you can already see this didn't even look bad, but guys, look at the crap coming off of here. It's absolutely miserable. This whole Q-tip here is black. And you don't want to go too crazy because these are carbon tracks, but you can kind of tell as I'm rubbing this, I am getting a lot of material off, and dust and years of buildup. So you can see already that this Q-tip is absolutely nasty. You see a little bit of red from my Sharpie, but you can see in the corner here that I still have some gook. some schmutz. So this is just the reason why I personally prefer to use the little clean room swabs. I just find that I can get into all the little nooks and crannies, as we see right here. Yeah, I can get right up to the last little bit of each track, and this is really just a tool that I prefer. So we're gonna clean in here real good. It's very important to make good electrical continuity. This area is good. You can kind of come in and get the top here. Because any little bits that you don't clean are going to find their way back into the slider. And then you will be faced with the same problem again. Guys, that's actually the #1 reason these get gunked up in the first place. If you cover your gear, you really would alleviate most of the problems. Really, all this dust buildup and whatnot comes from just the little foam covers usually that are above these sliders. They start to rot with age, and they're not perfect, and that allows dust and all kinds of material to get in here, and that'll gunk up your sliders. So we cleaned the carbon track. Okay, looks pretty good. So we're gonna put that aside, and we're gonna come back with a cotton swab again. And now what you want to do is you want to clean all the crap out of the track here. So this is where the slider shaft rides against, so this is why it feels so gritty and so nasty. And just going in here, you can feel it almost get smoother as you're cleaning. And I like to rotate the swab, kind of get a good clean side. But look, you can even see in there that we have all this black goop and crap coming out. And again, I will get in with my clean room swab. Sometimes when these are real bad, I'll take them all apart and just throw these into my little Rednex parts washer I showed in the last video, and just really soak them and get all this crap out of here, because it's just important to keep these clean. Okay, and last but not least, and you always want to use a fresh swab for this, okay, is you got to clean the little fingers on the shaft. And we can see we have a bent shaft here, so I'm going to try my best to straighten this out, because you can't get replacements anymore. So this is actually really nasty. Okay, there's a lot of crap. So in this event, I actually like to fill up the cap to my isopropyl alcohol, and I'll fill that up, and I actually just put the entire shaft in there, kind of let it soak for a minute. So we're going to give that maybe 30 seconds to a minute, and then kind of swirl it around, and you're going to see all this crap come out. Now you want to be careful, because these little fingers that grab the switch, they're extremely sensitive. So these little guys that ride on the carbon track are really fragile, and you do not want to bend them. Sometimes when the sliders don't work, it's actually because these are bent down. But I can see, looking over here, that they're very even with each other. So I'm just going to very carefully hover this switch over and swirl it around. We're going to break all the grime off of there, and then I'm going to come back with my clean swab. Ever so carefully, I'm going to go underneath, and I'm going to go around, very loosely and carefully, trying to just break the grime and gook and whatnot off. And of course, as I do this and break some of it free, I just like to go back and kind of give it a rinse. Of course, you can use some air, just blown on it is good enough, really. Keep doing this a few times and you'll get these contacts to be absolutely clean, and I can see under my own eye that they look great. So I'm going to finish this up and we'll be right back. Okay guys, so we're back and our switch is looking clean. At the same time, of course, you want to pull on the top of the shaft here. This is where you have that nylon insulator. That's going to come off first. So very carefully we want to pry that off. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and drop that into the IPA. And then last but not least, we have our little copper spring. So we're going to knock that into there as well. Then of course, I will try to straighten this guy out off camera the best I can. Just about right. See how we're doing there. Alright, I will do it on camera. And looks pretty straight to me. I will put it on a straight edge on a surface and double check. So the fingers are clean. Again, I'm going to take these out after giving them a little soap. Let's go ahead and use my little screwdriver here. Let's scoop that spacer out along with that insulator. And we just want to give these a really good clean. Okay, so now that we're done, let's assemble everything back together and I'll show you where to grease it. Okay guys, got all my parts here, so let's start off. So we have the bottom of the slider. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is to actually put the shaft back together. So we're going to pick the shaft up, and you're going to notice here that the spring, gotta really carefully grab it because these parts are little. This spring is actually concave. So this little spring here actually bends down. And I hope you can see that. So it's basically like this, okay, as opposed to being up like that. So you want to put that spring down on the shaft. And you can see how it's curved down towards me, the curvature of the earth. So we're going to carefully pull that down along the shaft. Okay, now we're going to take our spacer. We're going to drop that back over the shaft. And you'll see over here that there's a little plastic shoulder. So the metal part meets the plastic. So you want to push this down gently until it kind of snaps around the plastic. And you can kind of coax that with your little Q-tip here. Okay. So as you can see, that plastic insulator is pulled down. Okay. So here's where we actually want to apply the grease. So this is called some silicone grease. You can get it actually at the plumbing section, believe it or not, at your home improvement store. Okay, so what we're gonna do is carefully put a little bead just on the top of each side. So you can see the plastic insulator kind of forms an H. So we're just gonna go on the outer layers here and just gonna run a little bead of your grease like that. Then you're going to take your slider, and of course you want the orientation to be right. So let's do this because I know this is going to be important here. Come on, focus with me, please. Okay, so we can see that the large finger there is pointing down. Okay, so when you grab your housing, we can see my red mark where Japan was. Okay, we want it to be facing up like that. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put my slider in like so, and we're just going to gently work it up and down a few times and distribute that silicone grease. Okay, it feels pretty good. So I can leave my slider there in the middle. And lastly, again, we have the red up at the top for Japan. So we have my red mark here at the top of the body, which is also the single pin. And we're going to go ahead and place this together and form a nice little sandwich. So go ahead. Okay, there we go. So I've pushed the slider back together as so. So you want to move it to one side, carefully lay it down, and now you can either use a screwdriver or I take the pliers and just one at a time, very carefully, you want to bend each of these tabs back over that we had to unbend to get it apart. So again, really take your time here. Be very gentle. I like to keep the pliers shut and kind of just get it to get stuck on that tip there. I'm just going to roll the tabs over. So again, we can move our slider here, reverse our position, we're going to roll the tabs over. So now we're done. you'll see that this slider feels absolutely incredible. Okay, it's very tight but very smooth because of the grease we used. So this feels like a brand new factory slider. And now it's ready to install back in the synthesizer. And of course, if you would like to test the slider, get this out of the way. You can bring over your handy DMM, set it to resistance. I believe we have a 100K slider here. So you're gonna have to find the ground, and you can measure between one of the tracks. So you can see we're right at 100K. So we're measuring the resistance overall of that carbon track. So let's see if we anchor over here. So now that I'm between my outer pins here, you can see that I get 100K, 101. I'm gonna bring it all the way down. It's a variable resistor. Should see somewhere around 5 to 6 ohms is an acceptable range. And what you want to do to test is you want to slowly move this slider. My meter has a nice little bar graph, so I can see that the values are steadily increasing and it's smooth. I could see if there's erratic behavior, the values are jumping all over the place, then that slider would be no good and it's still dodgy connection. You can also use an oscilloscope or a curve tracer, but this is a very simple way of doing it. So now that we're done, we'll go ahead and clip our slider back into the synth. Okay, and I will flip this over and solder it back into place. So, just do a quick cover here. It's important that you keep your finger underneath the slider. So what I like to do, you can use a helping hand. Generally, I like to just pin the slider in place, so I have my index finger holding it flush to the board, and I very carefully will get some solder on there, and basically I just tack the 2 outer pins in. So I'll go ahead and tack that top pin in. Again, I'm keeping good constant pressure underneath, and I'll tack one of these bottom pins in. Okay, and then once I do that, that slider is solidly mounted in there. So what I'll do is I will completely flow the remaining pins all the way. So we get there, let's go across. We'll get this large pin that anchors the slider. This other large pin here. Okay, and then I'll come back and reflow and complete the joints that I used to tack in. So almost like when you're welding, you tack something into place. We want to hold it, make sure it's square, make sure it's good. And of course, when I flip this guy over, we can just feel how absolutely smooth this is now. And that's awesome. You can see that the shaft is nice and straight. So if I put one of my caps on, we're all lined up and the synth is ready to go, guys. So this is how you rebuild a fader. Hope this video helped, and stay tuned for more. Thank you.